You're listening to the Third Down Squad podcast, the best international news podcast for the National Football League. We're your hosts, Derek, Josh, and Toby. Let's get you ready for new set downs on Sunday.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Third Down Squad podcast. We are excited to bring you another great week of content. This week we have a bunch of new contract extensions that we're going to talk about today. We have players from both of our teams getting major contract extensions, and we'll give you your thoughts on that. And we also have the Texans tampering with the Patriots front office and where that can lead from there. And also we have our NFC North predictions for this upcoming 2019 season. We're going to start it off, though, with somebody who's not on either one of our teams but got a contract extension earlier this week. Kyle Rudolph, the tight end for the Minnesota Vikings, was one of the first people to get a contract extension this year for the Vikings with a 4-year, $36 million contract with $16.5 million in guaranteed money. Toby, what do you think of this contract? Was this a good call by the Minnesota Vikings to give him this extension?
Yeah, I think it was a good call that they give Kyle Rudolph a little bit of money and keep them on their team for the time being. First and foremost, I think Irv Smith Jr. is a great tight end, and I've said this on this podcast before. I would have loved him if the Saints had drafted him in the draft, but Minnesota got him. But you rarely see a rookie tight end coming out of the draft really performing on a team. So I think the leadership of a top tight end or former top tight end in Kyle Rudolph will really help him shape his game in the NFL and help him forward. So I think Kyle Rudolph will be a great mentor for Irv Smith, and he will be a reliable target for the Minnesota Vikings as well, because they need somebody in the end zone. You have Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen, both are great pass catchers, but both of them don't have that really big body that you need in the end zone against maybe a double coverage that a Kyle Rudolph has. So I think that's the most important part that the Minnesota Vikings are looking for in their tight end, and I think Kyle Rudolph will be their tight end number one for the next 1 or 2 seasons. So I wouldn't be surprised to see both of their tight ends, Irv Smith Jr. and Kyle Rudolph, see on the field on a bunch of their snaps, as they don't really have a third wide receiver other than Thielen and Diggs. So I believe 2 tight ends wouldn't be the worst thing to have in Minnesota, and they have a good running play as well. And Kyle Rudolph and both Irv Smith and him can block for the run as well. So to keep a guy like him around is always a good thing. They didn't overpay for him. His deal was a 4-year deal, which maxes out at $36 million with $16.5 million guaranteed. So it's $9 million a year, which is not too bad for a guy like Kyle Rudolph at the tight end position. Yeah, there is some concern about injuries, but if you can split the workload with a guy like Irv Smith Jr., I don't believe there is that high of a risk for Kyle Rudolph to get hurt again or miss extended time. So I really like the deal for the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, I agree. I love this deal by the Vikings. They did a great job of locking him up and doing it without spending tremendous amounts of money, like you mentioned earlier. This guy, I always thought that was a better tight end than what his numbers showed him. I feel like, he gets overshadowed a lot because of the combination of Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, probably the best wide receiver combo that we have in the NFL at this moment in time. But Kyle Rudolph is actually an astonishingly good player if you look at just the completion percentage of the throws that are thrown his way, the amount of touchdowns he gets in the red zone, and just his touchdown to reception ratio is actually really good. He's one of those guys that, you don't really like to get in fantasy too much, because he 1 week has 7 catches for 100+ yards and 2 touchdowns. And then another week can have 2 catches for 20 yards, and that's it. I mean, it's pretty much how his role is in Minnesota, and that high-powered offense that they have there. But, yeah, I agree. The contract is really good. Kyle Rudolph is an exceptionally good player. Good job by the Minnesota Vikings front office to make this deal and to keep the numbers low, but exceptionally fair to Kyle as well. I think this is a good play. All right, so now we're going to move on to another player, and this one is what Toby's probably going to like. We have Cameron Jordan of the Saints, defensive end for the Saints. He has a 3-year, $52.5 million deal with $42 million in guaranteed money. Toby, this is your guy. You have been pretty high on him as well during this podcast. What do you think of this deal? Was this a good one for you?
Oh, that's definitely what the Saints needed, and I think it was top of the list this offseason to get a deal with Cameron Jordan done, because he's basically their anchor in the defense. They have built around him for the last 2 seasons with the guys they came in with Marshawn Lattimore, with all the new safeties, with guys like Demario Davis and all the other guys. So he's the center stone, and he's a real locker room guy, and he always said he wants to play for one team like his dad did with the Minnesota Vikings. Just quick off topic, he was announced today that he will be entering the Minnesota Vikings Ring of Honor as well, so good for him after playing 13 seasons for the Vikings. But now back to Cameron. I mean, the guy really showed up the last 2 years. In 2017, he had 13 sacks in a season, made the first team All-Pro, and last season had 12 sacks and made the second team All-Pro. So to let a guy like that walk would be one of the most stupidest things the Saints could have done this offseason or after next season. So getting an extension, and at the rate that they got it for $17.5 million a year, if you compare that to the top defensive ends like a Khalil Mack, that's a phenomenal deal. The other top defensive ends get over 20 millions right now. So to get a deal like that done with Cameron Jordan, it's a fantastic deal for both of them. The guy wants to stay in New Orleans. He likes his teammates. He likes the team. The team loves him. The fans love him, and he doesn't cost that much. That's exactly the player that the Saints need right now to get more talent on the defense around him and still keep him around.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, you know this a lot more than I do. I only see Cameron Jordan, like you said, from the last 2 seasons. This guy has had some exceptional play for certain. The numbers back that up. And like you said, he's been pretty much the vocal leader of that defense for the last couple years, has been the guy that everyone kind of thinks of when you think of the Saints defense. Cameron Jordan, that guy that is right on the fringe of being up there with some of the most talented defensive linemen out there. Again, another great contract by the Saints. I feel like the numbers are very great. Cameron Jordan's definitely excited about that $42 million guaranteed. I can tell you that much. But yeah, this was another great deal for a guy that is an anchor on the inside, and any team would absolutely love to have Cameron Jordan, and that's probably another reason why the Saints were so eager to get this deal done, because they knew it would not take long for somebody to want to sign Cameron Jordan, especially after the years he's had. So congratulations to Jordan and the Saints. And now we're going to move on to my guy for the Colts, Kenny Moore, the undrafted free agent out of college in 2017, where the Colts picked him up and is now being offered a 4-year deal between $30 and $34 million with $6 million in incentives and $18 million of this guaranteed. Toby, I'll start with this one. I just want to say, first off, congratulations to Kenny. This dude absolutely deserves it. He is now going to be the highest paid slot corner in all of the NFL, which after last season, he was the best slot corner in football last year. Just quietly had that kind of a season when a lot of people didn't really pay much attention to it. But Kenny Moore had an exceptional season. He's only 23 years old, which is amazing that he's so young, but I think a lot of people had doubts in him because he's only 5'9". He's a very short corner. That explains why he's more of the slot corner position, to kind of be able to play against that. but he has abnormally long arms, and he's very athletic, and he's very intelligent on the inside. He was tied for the most interceptions inside in the slot last season with 3. So he definitely has an eye for the ball, and he also combined that with 77 tackles last season as well. So it's great to see Chris Ballard doing what he's doing. This is the 3rd player that he has basically brought through his system this year that is getting a contract extension. He had Pierre Desir getting his earlier in the year. That's obviously our other big name corner. And Mark Lewinsky, the offensive guard who played a lot of time last year at right guard. So again, he's just the other list of guys that are getting paid from being brought in the system and performing to the way Chris Ballard wants him. And Kenny is just such a great guy, not just on the field, but off the field as well. The locker room guys absolutely love him. There's just nothing bad you could say about this deal. Truly excited that Kenny Moore is going to be staying on board with us. And if he has another season like he did last year, oh my gosh, this Colts secondary is going to be really, really good next year.
Yeah, I mean, you said probably all you can say about the guy. I think a lot of people haven't heard the name before today and are asking themselves, why are the Colts giving that guy that much money? I've never heard of that guy, literally. And that's the problem with a bunch of Colts players, is that a lot of people in the Colts, they have a bunch of talented people on that roster that nobody knows about because national media just doesn't give the Colts that much attention. But Kenny Moore definitely deserves that contract. Like you said, he was the best slot cornerback last year. And I mean, at the age that he's at, he's 23 years old. What better than that, to be at that level of play and be that young and have the opportunity to give such a young player a long-term contract with your team. That just builds the Colts for that much more success in the coming years. Amazing deal again for both of them. I think all of the 3 deals that we've talked about that were made public this week are great deals for both the teams and all 3 of the players. And the Colts today made another great deal this year. I think they are definitely contenders for the coming years and a team to watch out for. And the national media should start to give them more attention than they have done in the last couple of years.
Oh, yeah, they definitely will, I believe. All right, so now we're going to move on to the next topic that we have, which is the NFL is now opening an investigation as to whereabouts of the Houston Texans possibly tampering with the Patriots front office. Now, please say the name again, Toby, for me, because I forget his last name.
Nick Caserio, the New England Director of Player Personnel.
There we go. That's who Houston is looking to target for their open GM position. As we all know, Houston fired their GM earlier this week, which was kind of a very sudden thing. And apparently, he's under contract with the Patriots. The Patriots absolutely love Nick there because Belichick has had so much high praise for the way he's able to bring guys in through the system. And I don't think he really wants him to leave. And that kind of explains why they're going so high on this this tampering thing. So, Toby, do you think that there will be some kind of legal thing coming out of this, or do you think that this is just a little media story to try and keep the Houston Texans from going after Nick?
Well, if you're going by the rulebook of the NFL, which clearly states that you can't approach another employee of another organization, just like the Houston Texans did. I mean, they had Jack Esterby, who was a former New England employee who is now the Houston executive vice president, at their ring ceremony for this year's Super Bowl rings. And he approached Nick Caserio for the open position as the Houston GM after they fired Brian Gain just on June 7th, about a week ago. And that's, according to the rules, it is tampering. Usually, the rules say that the Houston Texans should pay a fine and maybe have to give up 1 or 2 draft picks in the next coming years for that offense. Of course, it is not clear how much tampering there actually was, or if it was just kind of like, hey, we got an open position. If you want, you can have an interview for it, or if it was really, okay, getting concrete with it, actually having a certain amount of money ready. Nobody knows about that yet, what really was the content of that dialogue there at the ring ceremony. So I certainly think there is a fine there by the NFL for the Houston Texans. And if there is actually a real case of tampering and it is more than just, hey, we got an open position for you, you want it, or something like that, then maybe we can talk about maybe the Texans having to give up a couple of draft picks. But that is really for a bigger case against the Texans, not just a small thing, which I hope doesn't come to it. The NFL has had enough problems with illegal stuff and kind of all the gates that we had in the last couple of years in the NFL. It just gets too much, and it doesn't shine a great light on the NFL if another story like that comes out and turns out to be true.
Yeah, and based off of what I've read is that the Texans have been in constant contact with the New England Patriots, asking several times to interview Nick for that position, but the Patriots have refused to comment to them on the status of him and wanting to move on. I'm certain, for certain, he now knows for sure that his name is up there with the portal in Houston. So the story is definitely out now. Whether or not he knew that before with New England trying to keep it quiet, who knows? But yeah, it definitely does come down to what actual legal evidence can they prove that the Texans did. If ultimately they prove that the Texans have been secretly contacting him and giving him information on what he could do if he goes there, then certainly, we have a tampering issue and the NFL is going to have to take action with this. But like you said before, if it's just been, trying to contact Nick and say, hey, you obviously know we just got rid of this position, you're more than welcome to come over and see what it's all about. Obviously, there's no issue with that. But yeah, I did find it funny that being on social media nowadays, anyone can take anything and make it into the butt of the joke. And, we now hear the jokes of, oh, it's not so funny when somebody tries to cheat the other way around, does it, New England? I hear a lot of those jokes on social media for certain. I mean, again, there's just too much to really comprehend at this point. This is obviously going to be a story that's going to probably take a couple weeks to figure out. And obviously we'll keep you updated on it, whether or not that happens. But I think that for Nick, whatever his best decision is, if he wants to stay in New England or feels that the pay raise to move to Houston is much better for him, then all the power to him. I don't really think it should be up to New England to determine what his future is for himself. So, all right. So now we're going to move on to our final topic, and that is the NFC North predictions. And obviously, Josh isn't here at the moment. He had something to take care of. Whether or not he actually gets in here before we finish these up, he might end up just getting his predictions next week if he doesn't get in before this starts. But obviously, we're going to start here with the first team in the NFC North, who a lot of people think are going to be number one in the division this year, and that is the Chicago Bears. We're going to start with them. Toby, go ahead and give us your predictions for the Chicago Bears next season.
All right, yeah. Chicago, not the easiest of schedules. Let's get that out there before I do
Oh
a
yeah.
game-to-game prediction. But at the start of the season, it kind of starts off okay. Of course, the season opener this year, the Chicago Bears at home against the Green Bay Packers. I have that as the first win for the Chicago Bears. Of course, everybody's excited for the game because it's the first game of the season. Second game
Yep.
is at Denver. Week 2, I have it as the second win for the Bears. I said it last week. Denver is not that strong, or I don't believe they're that strong, especially at quarterback this year. Week 3 at Washington. They're all pretty young and new to the team in Washington. So I have them go 3-0 to start off the season. And the next game at home against Minnesota, that will be the first real test if the Packers game at the start of the season. I don't really think it's gonna show that much, as it is the first game in the season, but that week 4 matchup against the Minnesota Vikings will actually show how strong the Bears actually are. But at home, I have them win against the Minnesota Vikings. I think it's gonna be a close game, closer than a lot of people think, because I think the Vikings are gonna be stronger this year than they were last year. And Kirk Cousins had a huge down year last year, but he'll bounce back this year. But more to that later. And then in week 5, the Chicago Bears will travel to London and play against the Oakland Raiders, which I think will not be that big of a challenge for the Bears. And before their bye week in week 6, I have the Chicago Bears win out and 5-0. After they come back from the bye week in week 7, they are hosting the New Orleans Saints at home, who will hand them their first loss of the season, kind of like last year and the year before that. Then another home game for the Bears against the LA Chargers. Close game, but I think the Chargers are that little bit better than the Bears right now, especially on offense. They just have the better quarterback. So their second loss there. The next game they travel to Philadelphia. I have a win for them there. Like I said, I'm not that high on Philadelphia this year, but Bears Philly is going to be a great matchup this year, and it's going to be a close one, but still, I think the Bears will win that one. The week after that, they have a divisional matchup at home against the Detroit Lions. I give the Bears the win there as well. Detroit, if they don't make a miraculous leap forward from last season, I don't see a way that they can beat the Bears this year. Next game at the LA Rams, definitely a good matchup. Two of the top teams in the NFC last season, but at LA, it's going to be a tough road game for them, so I have a loss for the Bears there. Next game against the New York Giants. Bears are better than the Giants right now. Let's not talk around something that's not there. So Bears with the next win. Next game at Detroit, like I said, I don't see the Bears losing to the Lions right now, so another win for the Bears. Next game against Dallas, I give that one to Dallas. I believe Dallas has just a more well-rounded team right now than the Bears, but definitely another great matchup. Like I said, tough schedule for the Bears, but a lot of great matchups in there as well. The next one at Green Bay, I believe at home in Lambeau Field, the Packers will beat the Bears in the rivalry, splitting the rivalry this year. The second to last game against Kansas City, probably Kansas City will probably have a Tyreek Hill in there if they don't cut him entirely or he gets suspended for the entire season, which I don't believe he will. So Kansas City back at full strength, so I believe Kansas City will win that game. Another loss for the Bears. And to end out the regular season for the Chicago Bears at Minnesota, I believe it's going to be another loss for the Chicago Bears, running out their season with 4 consecutive losses and having a grand total of a 9-7 season for the Chicago Bears this year.
All right. Interesting there. Okay, that was an interesting part of the schedule. And Toby, I I was listening through on that whole schedule, and I was thinking, is this guy literally about to have the exact same records as me? I was like, oh my gosh, it's not happening. All right, so yeah, before we begin, yeah, this is a Chicago team with Trubisky, who's a year older, a year more experience. A team that obviously does not have Jordan Howard anymore, but is looking to improve on their offense, getting some of their receivers back, and obviously maintaining most of their defense from last season. I agree with you, Toby, that the first 5 games of the season before that bye week, they're going to win all of them, with the Vikings and the Packers games being very close. I think that early in the season, those games will be very close matchups. But yeah, 5-0 to start the season, and then they go on their bye. And then when they go on to host the Saints, I have them losing that game as well, being 5-1. I just think Saints are the more well-rounded team. And then going on to face the Chargers, I have them losing that game as well. Like you said earlier, the Chargers just have a better offense at this point, and they're just a better overall team than Chicago is. And then they go on to face the Eagles at Philadelphia. I have them winning that game, so they'll be 6-2. They go on to face host the Lions. I have them winning that game, 7-2. Going to face the Rams, I have them losing in LA, so they will be 7-3. And then the next 2 games against the Giants and the Lions, I have them winning those games, so they'll be 9-3. And then for the Cowboys, I had it a little different. I thought if this was in Dallas, I probably would have gave it to the Cowboys. But I think that even with the Cowboys improving as they are, I still think Chicago is a slightly better team defensively, is a lot better defensively to be able to stop the Cowboys in their tracks than what the Cowboys will be with their defense. So I have them winning that game. And then going on to face the Packers at Lambeau, yeah, I have them losing that game. The Packers, obviously, we all remember the Packers beating Chicago in the first night game of the season last year in a miraculous comeback win. I remember watching that game. That was great. And I'll have that as the same outcome. And facing the Chiefs at home, see, you had me a little hesitant there. Yeah, they had Tyreek Hill coming back. I just think the home field advantage of, we saw Patrick Mahomes face a really good defense at the end of the year when the Ravens came to town last year. If Lamar Jackson didn't make a bunch of sad mistakes, I feel like the Ravens would have come much closer. And I think Trubisky is a lot more matured now, and I think he's not going to throw a game away. So I think the Chicago actually win that game against the Chiefs. And then going to the Vikings, I do have them losing that game as well, the last game of the season, putting Chicago with an overall record of 11-5 on the year. Well, I never thought I'd be able to say that last year. All right, so now we're going to move on to the second team, which is the Detroit Lions. Toby, go ahead and give us your predictions.
All right, yeah. The first game of the season for the Lions is not that hard to predict. At Arizona, it's definitely going to be a win for the Lions. Arizona, with all that new, especially with the new quarterback under center, they're not going to be ready for week 1. So, first win for the Lions in week 1. Second up, LA Chargers. We already said they're the better team than the Bears, so they're definitely the better team than the Lions. So, first loss against the Chargers. Next game at Philadelphia, another loss for the Detroit Lions. There, as it is in Philadelphia, so with the home field advantage, I'm giving that one to Philly. Week 4, the week before the bye week, they are hosting the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs probably without Tyreek Hill. So key piece missing there, but still not enough that the Chiefs will fall to the Lions. So at their bye week, they're at a measly record of 1-3. Coming back from the bye, they are going to the Packers, another loss at Lambeau Field. After that, they're hosting the Minnesota Vikings, another loss with a record of 1-5. Their next hope comes against a game at home against the New York Giants, which I actually have them win. Giants, nobody knows who's going to be their quarterback at that point in the season, but still, it doesn't matter who their quarterback is. I don't think that Daniel Jones is ready, or Eli Manning still has what he needs to have to make it in the NFL, or to still be good in the NFL. So their second win against the Giants. Next up, at Oakland. I really don't believe in Oakland. Still not this season. I know they have a lot of talented players this year, but spoiler alert for our AFC West predictions, Oakland is not going to be pretty. The next game at Chicago, we already talked about it. It's a loss for the Lions. Next game against Dallas, it's another loss. At Washington, I have the Lions win. I like the Washington team this year, but I don't think they will make that big breakthrough in the first year of of their new guys they have there. Next game, again, Chicago, we already talked about it, another loss for Detroit. Then at Minnesota, I don't really feel the Lions doing well against their NFC North opponents, so another loss at Minnesota. Next comes Tampa Bay, the worst NFC South team as of right now. They're gonna get another win there. At Denver, it's gonna depend heavily on the weather in December. Up there in Denver, nobody can really tell, but I believe with Denver and their quarterbacks they have up there right now, I believe Detroit will win that game. And to round out the season against the Green Bay Packers, it's another loss at home, putting them at a record of 6-10.
All right, another close thing to what I have coming for you. Again, I thought that was going to be really, really close. Apparently, Toby and I are really on it today with our predictions being spot on. But yeah, as you can tell, the Lions pretty much the bottom of the barrel when it comes to this division. Still a long ways to go to prove themselves. But I agree with you completely on the first pretty much 6-7 weeks of the season. I do have them winning against the Cardinals. I think the Cardinals, like you said, they're just struggling with so many pieces right now. They just need to figure it out. And then I have them losing to the Chargers, and then at the Eagles, and then against the Chiefs for obvious reasons. And then that a week 5 bye is absolutely crucial. I mean that is just brutally bad for a team that probably doesn't need a bye week at that point. But and then after the bye, it doesn't get much better for them from me. I have them losing to the Packers on the road, being 1-4 through week 6. Unlike you, I actually have them winning against the Vikings. Just being at home, I think they have one game where they upset the Vikings somewhere in line there. I think they pulled one right out of their butts and figure it out. But they'll be 2-4 through week 7. And then they go on to face the Giants. I agree with you. They'll win that game because of the Giants QB situation. And they'll be 3-4. Going to the Raiders, I actually have them losing that game. I might have a little bit more confidence in the Raiders than you. I just think that overall, the Raiders' just talent level is pretty much the Lions' talent level is subpar to what the Raiders have right now. I feel like this is going to be one of those college football games where the more talented team just ends up winning it just for no clear reason, just because they're more talented. But I'll give that one to the Raiders. And then they go on to face the Bears in Chicago. They'll lose that one. They go to the they face the Cowboys. They'll lose that one. I actually have them losing to the Redskins. I feel like the Redskins will pull that one out at home against a struggling struggling Lions team. And then they'll face the Bears again at home and they'll lose that one. And then they go back to face Minnesota in their place and they'll lose that one as well. So 6 straight losses in the middle of the season for me. And then I have them beating both the Buccaneers and the Broncos. I think that the Buccaneers are still, a work in progress. And the Broncos, you're right. It depends a lot on who's the quarterback at that time and how's the weather approaching. But I think the Lions will find a way to pull that one out. And then I'll have them losing to the Packers even at home. So rounding out the 2019 season with a record of 5-11 for the Detroit Lions.
All right.
So now we're going to move on to the third team in the division, the Green Bay Packers, and I will start this one. First game at the Bears. We've already mentioned it with the Bears. The Bears are going to win that one. Going on to face the Vikings at home. I believe they'll win that one. And then the Broncos, them at home as well. I think they'll beat the Broncos as well. Facing the Eagles at home. I think this will be their second biggest test of the season so far easily. And I think that Eagles will find a way to pull the upset in that game. So they'll be 2-2 after week 4. And then they face the Cowboys at Cowboy Stadium. I think they will lose that game in a close fight with Dallas, making them 2-3. Then they go on to face the Lions and the Raiders at home, which they will win both games, putting them at 4-3. Going to Kansas City. Still unclear whether or not we're going to have any Tyreek Hill by that point. But I think Green Bay goes in and upsets the Chiefs and wins that game, putting them at 5-3. And then they go on to face the Chargers. I think with I can't remember if it was a short schedule or not, or a short week for them that week, but having to go from Kansas City to LA back-to-back weeks, I think they'll lose that game against the Chargers. And then they go on to face the Panthers at home, and they will win, which will put them at a grand total of 6-4 before the bye week. And I really like the spotting of that bye week, by the way. I think that's a really good spot for them. And then they will go on to face the San Francisco 49ers, which I actually think they will lose that game. Call me crazy all you want, but I think that the 49ers will have kind of figured themselves out a little bit by the time that season. So I think the 49ers will give them a run for their money there. And then I have them winning 4 of their last 5 games. Going at the Giants, they will win that game, beating the Redskins at home, beating the Bears at home as well. They will lose to the Vikings when they go to Minnesota. But then I also have them beating the Lions at home, finishing them with a record of 10-6. Toby, your predictions.
All right. Again, we're not that far off each other. To start the season, first 3 games, same for me. Starting off with the losses, we already said, win against Minnesota and a win against Denver. Week 4, I have them beating the Philadelphia Eagles at home. Like I said, I don't trust the Eagles this year. I don't know why, but it's just a gut feeling that I have for this year. At Dallas, their second loss against Detroit, like I already said, win there. Against Oakland, again, I don't believe in Oakland, so another win for Green Bay there. Then on their West Coast swing to Kansas City, I think, like you said, we're not sure if Tyreek Hill plays there. It's week 8, so it's right on the fringe there with the suspension. So he might play, but I think Kansas City can pull it off at home at Arrowhead. So a loss for Green Bay there, and another loss the week after at LA. 2 tough games, like you already said, back to back. Then before the bye week against Carolina, another win, putting them for their bye week at a record of 6-4. Then coming back at San Francisco, I have them win that game. I just believe it's going to be a tough one. That's for sure. 49ers are improved, and if they get Garoppolo back for the entire season, it's a whole different team than last year. Then at New York Giants, I have them win that game against Washington. Also a win for them. Against Chicago, we already said that. It's a win for them. At Minnesota, I have them lose another game. And at Detroit, it's another win to round out the season, putting them at a record of 11-5.
All right, so there we go. All right, sweet. Okay. So yeah, again, not very far from each other. That was actually pretty good. We were both 6-4 going into the bye week. So, all right. So, last team for the NFC North division, and that is the Minnesota Vikings. And I'll start this one again. They will start their season with a home opener against the Atlanta Falcons, where I think that home field advantage will give them the ride to victory. They will win that game, but then will lose their next 3 games after. They will lose to the Packers at Lambeau Field, hosting the Raiders. I think the Raiders go in and win that game. So that's just my opinion again. And then they will face the Bears at Chicago. They'll lose that one as well. And then going into week 5, they will face the Giants, and they'll win that game, making them 2-3. And then they will face the Eagles again. And I think that just for some reason, when the Vikings face defenses like the Eagles, they just seem to falter just so much. And I think they'll lose that game as well, making them 2-4. Then they'll go to face the Lions. And as I said earlier, that I thought the Lions would win one game, and being at home at Ford Field, I think they will win that one. So it'll be 2-5. Then they'll go to they'll host the Redskins. I think they win that game 3-5. They'll go to Arrowhead and lose, and then they'll go to AT&T Field and lose to the Cowboys, putting them at 3-7. And then they will they'll win to the Broncos. They'll put them at 4-7. Then they go to their bye week in week 12, and then they go on to face the Seahawks at Seattle, and they'll lose that game. They'll win against the Lions in week 14. They'll lose to the Chargers. And then basically to end the season, I have them beating the Bears and the Packers. So at least they were able to end on a hot note. I just think that this schedule for the Vikings is one of the more difficult ones that I've seen so far, just with the problems in the division, having to face the Chargers, the Seahawks, the Cowboys, the Eagles, and the Chiefs. I mean, that's a very difficult schedule for the Vikings to compete with.
Yeah,
so their record's 7-9.
Yeah, that's basically the NFC North schedule this year, with the NFC East and the AFC West. Tough schedule for all of them. Starting off week 1, the Atlanta Falcons. Usually Minnesota starts out the season really strong, especially at home. So a win for the Minnesota Vikings there. At Lambeau Field, the loss there against Oakland. I just can't be as hopeful for Oakland as you are, Derek. I just can't. And Minnesota has so much talent on their team, and at home as well. It's a win for Minnesota there. Then the loss at Chicago, and then they go on a little bit of a hot streak there in the next coming weeks against the New York Giants. A win there. At Philly, another win there. And you said it, Minnesota usually kind of blanks out when they play strong defenses, but I feel like with all the guys that have left the Eagles in the last 2 years, I don't think the Eagles defense is that strong anymore next year. That it's not a, I believe it might be a fringe top 10 defense, but that is if everything goes perfectly for the Philly defense. Then they go to Detroit, they win that game as well, and then against Washington, another win. Then they go to Kansas City at Arrowhead. It's a loss for me there for the Minnesota Vikings. Then at Dallas, another loss there, and they're hosting the Denver Broncos with a win, putting them at a record of 7-4 before the bye week. Then they go to Seattle. Up there at CenturyLink, it's always tough to play. I give them the loss there. Then at home against the Detroit Lions, it's a win for them there. At the LA Chargers, I mean, I don't understand its schedule here. Sorry for not predicting it, but they are going to Kansas City, Dallas, fly back home, go to Seattle, fly back home, go back to LA, and then fly back home. Usually the NFL kind of wanted to make the schedules more that there's less traveling time for the teams, but that schedule for the Minnesota Vikings kind of seems really painful and excruciating for them at the end of the season.
Yeah.
But still, running out the season at home with 2 home games against Green Bay and Chicago, we already talked about it, with the Bears and the Packers, both the win for the Minnesota Vikings. I hope that they can keep that up with all the trailing they have to do. They have a bye week in between the Denver and the Seattle game, putting them at a record of 10-6, which would actually put the Chicago Bears, if my predictions are true, out of the playoffs this year.
Sheesh. Well, Toby coming in with the drastic fire there. Just a quick recap here. Toby and I are both in agreement that the Detroit Lions are still the bottom of the division and need work. The winner of the division, Toby's, is the Green Bay Packers, with the Vikings as a close second. And then mine was the Chicago Bears, with the Green Bay Packers as a close second. Again, these are way too early predictions, but I'm very shocked that the Vikings will have a better record than Chicago. But then again, that's just me. We'll just have to see how their offense does at the end of the year.
Yeah.
All right, so that was it for our podcast, guys. We apologize that we couldn't get Josh in here as well for his, but we'll certainly get his predictions in shortly, probably next week as well. Thank you so much to everyone who watches. We hope you enjoyed. Be sure to follow us on YouTube, like, and subscribe. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at T3DS_NFL. Be sure to listen to us on Spotify at the Third Down Squad. And as always, guys, peace.
See ya.